from the Africa Open Institute for Music Research and Innovation. Have you got that, Andrew?
Yeah.
We start again.
No, I'm fine.
From the Africa Open Institute for Music Research and Innovation at Stellenbosch University. So, Manfred asked me to open this exhibition of his, and it's a great privilege for me to do so. I'm not an art historian, I'm not an artist, but I am a great fan of Manfred's work. Our paths first crossed when a mutual friend of ours, the filmmaker and artist, Arian Kaganoff, contacted me and asked me to borrow from the Stellenbosch University Library the collected works of Franz Kafka.
No, that's a big.
Brecht? Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. Of Bertolt Brecht, and deliver them to this address in Woodstock.
In observatory.
Thank you. Observatory. And I arrived with it was very difficult to get all of these books from Stellenbosch University Library on the kind of pay grade that I am. But they eventually allowed me to carry out one or two big crates?
It was a huge container.
It was a huge container of books, hard cover, complete edition, critical edition of Brecht, which I delivered to this man I had not met before, called Manfred Zeller, at his home in, as we have now ascertained, Observatory. And it was my first visit to Manfred. I didn't know what these books were for. It was some kind of nefarious plot that was being hatched. You don't need to explain what it was, we can keep that quiet, but many months later I fetched the books again, took them back to the Stellenbosch University Library. But I had sat in that room, surrounded by art, and it was the first of many visits I paid to Manfred's house, because I was so intrigued by this wonderful work. So over the years, I have acquired a number of Manfred's pieces, and I thought I'd start off by telling you what appealed to me about the work and why I kept on going back to Manfred to look at more of his work. And I'll start off with woodcutting, woodcuts, wood prints. Woodcut printing, which was done in the 50s and 60s. 59, early 60s. And I'm thinking of two particularly wonderful pieces. The one is called General hat nie genug. General never has enough. This figure, this skeletal figure in army dress, in uniform, juggling coffins and bodies, and with skulls as decoration medals. And another one dating from approximately the same time, a mushroom cloud of a nuclear explosion, Hiroshima. A skull in the mushroom cloud, grinning down to a globe kept in the claws of the eagle of war, effectively.
Yeah.
Both of these expressed as wonderful woodcuts with wonderful simplicity, but also directness and intricate detail. I'm also thinking of a piece of Manfred, his own likeness, swimming face in a sea of oil with a tanker sinking. A glistening black paint, most of the painting. Also a nativity scene, which is disturbing. It is a layered piece consisting of a prototype of a postcard meant for a Roman Catholic church, and then defaced by Manfred himself, with the baby Jesus being supplied with a prosthetic leg, Joseph and Mary leaning over their newborn, the child thanking them for this earth that it was born into, looking up at a mobile of limpet mines and guns. So these are some of the extraordinary works, and I've always been fascinated by these themes of war and violence and destruction, also capitalism, and also the irreverence with which Manfred has gone about, and respect in dealing with these subjects. So I've also, over the years, acquired other work of Manfred's, abstract work that has nothing to do with what you see on the walls around you, seemingly. Work without slogans, without overt political gestures. These are also works that date from, I think, more or less the 60s, and are works of pencil and ballpoint pen. And what makes them extraordinary is that effectively what they just do is they just follow a rhythm of drawing, circling, until the rhythm finds a form, and until the form emerges as something completely beautiful. It looks as if it is something picked up in nature, sculpted in a way that only the most natural, beautiful things are. And so these works, I've always thought, possibly are Manfred's most political works because there are no political gestures in them. It seems always to me that they say the real political stand is that art is the only thing to do, and that art is the only way through which to speak. So the exhibition that we look at tonight, these works are of course not those kinds of works. They are works that position themselves, that declare themselves as political work. And they, to my understanding of the work that I've seen of Manfred's, they speak to many of the themes that he has treated throughout his life. Things to do with freedom, with protest, with resistance, with dissent. And it's not difficult to see that in what we see behind us. So, maybe one more thing to say. It's not only what we see in this room, but there is also on the other side of that wall, there's a small collection of works of art on A4 pieces of paper. These I have a very special connection with. I don't own them, but I was partly responsible for their making. I was working on a book called The Journey to the South, which was a parody of Hermann Hesse's book, The Morgan Journey to the East. What's that in German? Morgenlandfahrt. Yeah. Anyway, Manfred, I asked him if he would make art to accompany the text, and he did so over many months. First accompanying me to Stellenbosch, taking pictures of where I work, and then proceeding to deface those pictures in very particular ways. The art that you will see there on a smaller scale is not in that sense very different from what we see here, in this sense that it is a scratching out of things. It is an overwriting and overriding of things, and it is a mess making on the surface that is intended to be seen and read as such, and as a political act. These works very particularly also speak to censorship and the idea of resistance against censorship. Now, in Manfred's living room, there is a painting of him in his house. I hope it's still there. I haven't been there for a while. In your house, in the passage, behind some burglar bars. It's in the lounge.
You're talking about the room.
No, big. I think it's a triptych. The one behind the burglar bars.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah. So the lounge is painted, you are painted, but the burglar bars are real. Yeah, they're real. And this is it's an extraordinary piece of work. So I think, when I think of that work, that the burglar bars, in a way, in that work, points to the sort of limits, the possibilities of the painting and the art. You've painted some of it, but some of the incarceration you couldn't paint. And this painting, for me, connects with what we see here tonight. And that is that these lockdown paintings are fundamentally not only about lockdown during COVID, but that they are also about the house where you had to be confined in as a space of self-enclosure. So, like everyone, the house is a place of self-enclosure. So sometimes this house is a place where you draw back and where you're closed in, is a place which is externally imposed, as those burglar bars imply. It's either through regulations of COVID or through crime, but it is nevertheless self-enclosure. And the house in that sense becomes a kind of island within which there is an imagination, which thinks about incidents and events. So in this sense, these lockdown paintings for me are not very different than the paintings that were also in your house about apartheid censorship, the paintings that you've done for the Journey to the South on that side of the wall. They're really imaginings of the world from the enclosure of your house, from your studio where you're surrounded by your work, the sounds of the radio, almost always that I've been there, always that I've been here, they're classical music, where in that studio there is a coupling of art with news, of paint with history, of pencil with critique, of ink with social reflection, in such a way that there's a kind of auto-symbiosis of some kind. And there is, in a way, then, a sense in which these historical coordinates on display here, the masks, the rapes, the violent incidents, the drones with the masks, the fact that one couldn't get onto beaches, historical coordinates, these themes of freedom and dissent, of self-expression, regeneration, critical awareness, artistic integrity, they're all working out of self-relationships of the artist in the home. So, in his home, Manfred, in his 80th decade, in his current obsessions, and the manner in which not only the external circumstances like COVID, but an inevitable, I think the German word is Altersstil, a style of old age, is informed more and more by a place of dwelling, a circumscribed place of dwelling. This studio, this place, this experience of the self is increasingly not out of the world, but inside the world of the house and the studio. So we know that the COVID epidemic has had a huge effect on people, and disproportionately on older people, cutting them off from their worlds and their social networks and their relationships as they were kept in their spaces, in making them islands. They're isolated spaces for self-care, and where their vulnerable immune systems, biologically of course, but also metaphorically, were protected. So in this sense, the global pandemic-induced lockdowns have now caught up, I think, with Manfred's remarkable art. I think his art has always been the place from where the house and the sense of restriction of freedom has been expressed and sensed and then expressed. So I think this is now caught up with this art. And these lockdown paintings are mere continuations, really, of his working out of an immune system that enables being in the world. And art is a habit of experiencing the world. So, in other words, when we see these large painted surfaces, these bold colors, what seemingly looks like an almost careless application and tempo of brush strokes, the inscriptions, the ruptures and defacements, the themes of carnivalesque death there at the back, the infestation contagion, the environmental collapse, all of these and more, we see the imagination railed against the world, in the world of art, and in the world as art.
Thank you. That's the last word. Art must rule the world. We don't need politicians, we don't need issues, we don't need religions. Art must rule the world.
Yeah, yeah.